Hello, Irene. Welcome.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Hello, Janet. Welcome to
Hi,
our
Stephan.
panel discussion today. Thanks so much for joining us here at the TNW and Startup Genome panel. Our topic today is global efforts to accelerate underserved startup communities. And please allow me to very briefly introduce yourself. Janet, you are the CEO of the Digital Opportunity Trust. You're working predominantly with very young people, 18 to 26, something I believe, or 29, trying to build entire cohorts and communities of social innovators, digital ambassadors. And I was incredibly impressed. I think I saw a few numbers saying you've trained up about 6,000 of these young ambassadors, but touched the lives and the opportunities of more than 1 million people, which is incredible. So really glad to have you with us. And Irene Arias Hofman from IDB Lab, thank you so much for joining us. You are certainly not new as an organization to what we are trying to discuss here. I saw on IDB that you've been in the space since 1959, which I find absolutely astonishing. Very much focusing at developing opportunities for social inclusion in Latin America and the Caribbean. So thank you so much for joining us as well today. And yeah, let's take it away if you like, hoping for a vivid discussion. Allow me to open up with one or two statements. The overall conference obviously is under the impression of COVID-19 and what we have seen during the peak of the crisis, but also now taking a look towards heading into a recession. What does that really mean for our startup creative communities, but also all the other economic and societal factors that are somewhat depending on tech. And I ask myself a lot the question, what's the role of the tech economy post-COVID-19? Can we use tech, can we use the startup ecosystems to help us restart our economies like we did it at least in the very mature markets after the Great Recession in 2009-10? Tech played a critical role. I'm sitting here in London and I've witnessed the role of tech in the community in restarting London as a financial center. But I'm also asking myself a little bit the question, looking back at this boom that we've seen and measured at Startup Genome for the tech community, can we possibly rebuild with a bit more inclusiveness in mind? We've seen negative externalities of the tech boom, divisions in society, increasing rents, parts of society because of their education, their background, that could not participate in the wealth creation that we've seen elsewhere. So with that in mind, should we aim at rebuilding a slightly different economy? And what does that really mean for our startup and tech communities in particular? So these are the big themes that are very much on my mind. But maybe, if I may, because we are talking about inclusiveness, and one topic possibly remains unchanged, female entrepreneurship in tech. In the developed world, in smaller, younger ecosystems, it has been bothering all of us for many years. I don't think any of us have found the right solutions as ecosystem leaders in order to change the game here to be more inclusive. And maybe we give it a start with that aspect of it. Why are we all struggling so much to include female founders, female team members into the startup ecosystems? And I believe that's true and applies in both the highly developed clusters, but also the emerging centers in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and elsewhere.
Yes.
Janet,
would you like me to kick off?
Please,
I'd
please,
be happy to kick off. Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. Under COVID-19, the acceleration to digital is so critical, and we must ensure that, I believe access to the internet is a basic human right. And I think that this is something that we can all play a critical role in. In terms of young women, Dot has worked with, as you said, thousands of young women across Africa. And I'm going to focus my remarks sort of at a micro level and connect them up to a macro level in the time we have. One key thing with COVID-19 that we are seeing across our networks of young entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs in particular is the sense of hopelessness and the sense of the uncertainty. And what does that mean for the rebuild and rebuilding with an inclusive lens? And so it is about tech and digital, but it's also about that mindset, and it's about the behavior. And so any efforts that we make we need to engage directly with young women at the center of the design of the learning programs that speak directly to their unique needs. And I can give an example in Ethiopia. DOT's approach is a peer-to-peer learning model. And in Ethiopia, where we've worked with thousands of young female entrepreneurs, the World Bank Gender Innovation Lab did a recent evaluation, and they found that the women in the DOT program were demonstrating 30% higher revenues and income than a comparable group. And they put it right down to the fact that it was a mindset shift. It was their levels of confidence, self-efficacy, that can-do attitude. And they really brought that forward, and it made a significant difference. So when you couple that with the digital skills, again, that behavior is really, really important, because it's not just going to be about the digital piece of it. The digital skills are important. And again, to engage more young women in the ecosystem, we need to listen carefully and put them again at the center of the design and understand the way in which they respond in a digital world, the way in which a conversation is much more important as a way to engage than just a click and a sign up. What is a safe space for young women? We know that mobile money like M-Pesa, is safer and allows women to separate household income from income they want to invest in their business. So that acceleration in increasing digital, but a digital that is safe and secure for young women. And that has a lot of ripple effects that we can talk about. And then finally, the inclusion more networks, female-led networks. The startup ecosystem is heavily male-dominated, but we do have female networks like the African Network for Cooperative Entrepreneurs, or the Entrepreneurship Cooperative. It's global, but it's focused on young women. So that is 3 key examples, and I'd like to just close. And then Irene, I'm back and forth because I know the finance is really a critical piece of this as well. But building those digital skills at scale. And DOT did some very innovative work with the government of Rwanda, which was a large-scale initiative that brought in international technology companies, local telecoms, local mobile operators, local governments, and national governments, along with these young digital ambassadors. And in a space of 18 months, they were able to reach 40,000 people right across the country. Many people who are running small and micro enterprises, many of them were young women. And so leveraging digital in a country like Rwanda, that's going to be a cashless society in 2024, where all services are going to e-services, it's imperative that we do digital skills, digital literacy at scale, but connecting it right into the needs, particularly of young women and young entrepreneurs.
And Irene, building on what Janet just said, when you look, I should put that into place. Just had a previous discussion with Lucia Cohen from Smart Africa. He made a very strong plea saying, whatever you talk about in inclusiveness, but also overall societal development, education is the one thing. We got hundreds of millions of population in sub-Saharan Africa that have not yet received the foundational skills in order to truly participate. And I assume particularly female entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs, other minority groups that are not living in the large centers might be prone to that. And it's maybe not unique to Africa. We see that in Eastern Europe and in Asia as well. How's the situation in Latin America, and what are you doing at IDB?
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen, and also Startup Genome, FT, and the Next Web. I think it's great to be part of this conference. And Janet and I had spoken before, and I can relate a lot to some of what she said in terms of the Latin American Caribbean context. Well, we are different from other regions still with the rising COVID curve. We just hit more than 2 million people affected by it, and so it's a tough situation on what was already a very unequal region. So the point, Stephen, that you raised in terms of this is not now just about restarting the economy. This is about creating and taking the opportunity to create a different, much more inclusive economy. I completely agree. I think we really feel very strongly from the Innovation Lab of the Inter-American Development Bank group, but as a group, the group as a whole, a call to action on that front. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to, we are reinventing ourselves, and our organizations themselves are reinventing themselves. We ask our own team at the Innovation Lab, and more than 70% of the staff felt, our work in the last 3 months has shifted significantly, and how we do it has shifted. And what I see is an opportunity to make visible the invisible. So a lot of entrepreneurs that are in less developed ecosystems, and very much with the theme of this panel of how we accelerate those. This is the opportunity, because as Janet said, connectivity and digital skills and digitization is now going to be, it's a basic service, it's a basic need that, and it's gonna be, I think, an opportunity to democratize access to a lot of services, and also democratize access to founders of startups in less developed ecosystems to be part of the global ecosystem. And we run, just to give you an example, and that relates also to the role of female founders. In the first weeks of COVID, we ran a challenge, and just in a few days, we have over 500 proposals, very high quality. The top 20 are now being implemented in things that have to do with the health emergency, and several of them are actually founded or led or co-led by women. So, for example, in Mexico, Unima, the chief scientist is a great a great woman who they are really doing a extremely original and unique research into a different way of testing. So I think there is an opportunity, but maybe just to focus on, since we talked about the importance of mindset, the importance of skills, but as Janet said, also the finance part is important, and as your latest report of the Global Startup Ecosystem report, and congratulations, by the way, on the 2020 report, points out, total VC funding has dropped globally in all the ecosystems. Imagine in the ones that are more emerging. So one of the actions that we went straight into as COVID started was to put together a liquidity facility for startups and scale-ups. In our own portfolio in Innovation Lab, we have 325 startups. So we started by selecting the top, the ones that were highly promising, but were facing difficulties fundraising, to get them through this. And also because we believe that what they are doing is going to lead to a much more inclusive type of society. And it's using tech, but adapting it very much to the conditions and with the needs and the ways and the situation on the ground. And for example, Pago 46 is one of the startups that we selected in Bolivia. This is not in, among the 70% of the concentration of the VC ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. Bolivia is a very good example of the type of ecosystem that we really need to accelerate. And Pago 46 is doing just that. It's taking a really good tech solution in terms of payment system, but adapting it to the situation on the ground, which involves an analog part as well, because it's still a very much cash-led society.
Thank you very much, Irene. Samia, thanks so much for joining us. Samia from the World is the lead policy officer of the World Bank Group. Thanks so much for joining our panel today.
Thank you, Stephan. Apologies.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
Samia, I said in the beginning, we're trying to explore to a good degree as we are coming out of COVID, hopefully at some point soon. We might head towards a global recession, which has impact on all our economies and the startup community in particular. Wanted to discuss a little bit, can we use this opportunity, in a sense, if we want to see it as an opportunity to think about what kind of restart of our economies do we really want to have? We've seen many positive things in the startup boom over the last 10 years. Undoubtedly, the value creation is extreme in some places of the world. It's getting broader, that's great. But we've also seen a divide in income, an incredible divide, prices rising, etc. So inclusiveness was not necessarily the predominant result that we've seen. On the contrary, if you think about rebuilding, well, reacting to COVID, but also rebuilding, we're really interested to hear your perspectives on what are good policies, what are good initiatives, what should we think about as startup leaders, as policy leaders, when we think about how is our startup community going to look in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years? What do we really want to have?
Absolutely. And thank you, Stephan and Startup Genome, for inviting me. It's really a delight to share the stage with Irene, whom I worked with when she was in IFC, and now, of course, leading IDB's lab, and Janet. COVID-19 has really exposed all the vulnerabilities of the existing digital divide, as we see families that are not connected, are not able to work from home. Kids who do not have internet access are unable to complete their degrees. What the World Bank has been doing for the last 3-4 months is deploying additional funding for COVID-19 responses. And our president has announced a wide range of projects that will no doubt create a bit what you described, Stephan, an injection, and the entrepreneurs and the startup system is more needed than ever. In the last 3-4 months, I have seen around 12 billion worth of investment operations, mostly around health and education, that would be ideal for many of our development countries to be stirred, to be led by entrepreneurs, because they have a local content. Has to do with providing local health content online in the local language. Who's going to do it other than the real locals who are familiar and embedded in that culture? The same thing goes for education, whereas we definitely see a world of big cloud computing project for education, ensuring the content is available, shared, repurposed online within the same country, within the same region. So much more content and services for education, whether it's targeting teacher training, parents training, or the student themselves, especially those with special need. All of this is needed and does not exist. So it's not a space that is crowded, that is competing with any other space. It's a novel new space where innovators, entrepreneurs, young people with ideas are needed, either to set up just their own business or to partner with other companies. And I think what we are looking for as the World Bank is first identifying these entrepreneurs, these people with great ideas that not only have the idea but can execute on it, and also the set of partners, the venture capital, the more established company, the project management, the procurement know-how, going to market that they need. And we're seeing several opportunities. I'm working right now on Turkey, one of the biggest education projects of the World Bank. We have similar things in Vietnam, in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Cote d'Ivoire. So I would look at it like a great opportunity and needed immediately to respond to the terrible impact of COVID-19. I'll stop here.
Okay.
Samia, thank you so much for putting education at the center. I recall our previous interview with the Serbian Prime Minister, Ana Babic, pointed out that luckily enough, she set her government up last year to invest into more virtual, more e-based digital education. Right. And luckily enough, in February, what did she say? A Serbian kid did not miss out on one single day of education in the middle of the crisis, because they could switch over to a virtual format and preserve the fabric of their learners, of the young pupils.
Absolutely.
So clearly see
very,
the importance.
Yeah, very good point.
I wanted to put into the discussion a little bit as well. When we think about startup communities and the opportunities, we believe there's a whole lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs locally, addressing these local solutions that are different to those that we are developing in London or the Silicon Valley. So organic solutions that do something good for society, be it in education, be it in e-health, be it in COVID response. But there's a question also, do you also see that these local entrepreneurs build a viable business for themselves? Do they become viable? Do they possibly become scalable across their region? Because other regions of a similar degree of maturity of development would benefit. Let's say I'm working in digital education, and I take my solution from Rwanda to a developing market in Asia. Would that work? And do I have these scaling opportunities? Have you seen any examples? Should we encourage that further, this connectivity?
Absolutely. We're seeing many of that. I'll give you a very small example, though, on the need that you are mentioning, Stephan. We have, through the State University of New York in Korea, started a competition for entrepreneur of fragile and conflict states. And we are receiving great ideas. The winners of this are entitled to a 2-week coaching, mentoring, one-on-one with venture capital. Typically, it would have been in Seoul, but now it will be online. Well, I'm amazed by the number of great ideas that are formulated, but the style and writing it in a business plan, more westernized type template, is missing. So I see a bit of what you're mentioning there. Great ideas, great content, yet the language and the ability to explain this to a Western venture capital, to maybe not to us, but to possible investors coming in from Canada, from the US, from France, maybe there is a bit of a disconnect. So also training on the know-how, the business language, the marketing is key, especially to women. I find proposals coming from women-led entrepreneur, really excellent ideas, but a bit weaker to formulate that whole business scale up, going to market language that venture capital and investors are looking for. Thank you.
Irene and Janet, you touched upon.
It's
please go ahead. Irene, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, Samia. No, I was gonna say that I really agree about so we focused quite a lot on the visibility part. So surfacing those ideas that otherwise may not be known, and so I'll at idblab.org in the COVID page we have an innovators map. So we've tracked now almost 700 of the innovation ideas that are tackling, and those are just the ones that are tackling COVID needs. So the visibility part, I think, is quite important. But also, you touched on how to adapt certain ways and tools that maybe may have been created and used in the more in Silicon Valley and other hubs, but they don't necessarily are in sync with exactly the tools that the local ecosystem needs. So we've adapted that. I see that there's a lot of activity of all of the people that are connected to this session. Thank you for everyone. And I saw Franklin Ribeiro from the Sao Paulo hub. So with Cubo is the largest innovation hub in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have a space together with them at the innovation hub. So we've created a Brazil au Cubo. So taking the best of Cubo, the best of that experience, knowledge, etc., to other parts of the region that are much more underserved, and also creating tools like, for example, the Startup Survival Toolkit to help startups navigate the current situation. And these are tools that are very much adapted to what we know works and doesn't work in the region. So I think that piece is very important.
Irene, is there an element at the moment where you mentioned it before, you're building connectivity, and maybe we actually do have a chance. We are not focusing all the development on our conversations on the big centers right now because we can't meet physically. Right. We can bring in people. Our colleagues from Australia and New Zealand were saying they don't really see a downturn in connectivity, global connectivity, because for them they are far away anyhow. They can't meet in one of the big centers. The shift to virtual actually helps. Do you see that as well for more remote geographies that are normally not part of the global ecosystem circuit?
100%. I think there's a phrase by Stephen Johnson. He says, if you look at history, innovation doesn't come just from giving people incentives. It comes from creating environments where their ideas can connect. And what we saw before is that a lot of that connection happened physically. And if you were not in the Cubo Innovation Hub in Sao Paulo, Sao Paulo having like more than 50% of the activity of VC in the Latin America and the Caribbean, you kind of missed out. Right now, it's such an equalizer because we are running, for example, with one of our regional partners, the Venture Academy, and they are running courses every week. They used to do them in location, so only those that could afford the time, the space, and being in close to those locations, typically bigger hubs or in smaller countries but highly developed, like for example Uruguay, could participate. what they are seeing now, it's far more attendance and from many, many more ecosystems. And that shows you also that, for example, one of the leading top COVID prototypes that we selected through the call we had is from Ecuador. Two entrepreneurs that were extremely qualified in terms of AI, big data, and geospatial technology have put it to use for a very different purpose, in this case for contact tracing, in partnership with the Ministry of Health. What they're doing is open source, open code, and people can replicate it outside. So that's also, not only can they participate more and can be more visible, their ideas can also become global much more rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Stephan, if I can pick up on both Samia's and Irene's comments and really reinforce the importance of the local innovation, local content. When COVID-19 hit, we launched a call for what we're calling street teams. And these were groups of very courageous young people, young women in particular, across 11 countries, who had rapidly pivoted and were developing solutions for COVID, whether it was in the education situation, mental health and wellness, health in particular, proper information. They're working in refugee camps, they're working in informal settlements, and they are connected on a platform for sharing their ideas as well. And that peer-to-peer support has helped them each to innovate and grow, and then of course spread to other communities and have other young people pick up the ideas and take it forward. So I think this concept of idea sharing and leveraging the digital capabilities that we're beginning to see is really important. We have to make sure, though, that we overcome the digital divide still, because that exists, and particularly for women, the gender digital divide. But to support them, the challenge again is the ecosystem is full of gaps. And so we talk about young people as digital hoppers. You know, they're in their communities and they go, I can go here and get this, I can go there and get that support, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales pitch. And so that ecosystem has to come together, and it has to come together under a gender lens. And it can be done using a catalyst system, which is what we've had to do. But I think that investment needs to be made because we're missing the pipeline of innovation ideas, because they get so far and then the ecosystem is not there to support them. It's at a different level. And so huge opportunity. I'd love to, what you're saying about rebuilding and thinking about inclusivity first and foremost, and young women right at the center of this.
If I can add,
Samia, please.
If I can add very quickly to what Janet just said, we are seeing countries where there is a national digital transformation strategy, like a digital economy project, whether they're financing it themselves or with help of partners and donors like IDB or World Bank or DOT. These countries bring along the private sector, the industry, and there is a big positive vibe created about technology. So the first thing that these countries look at is digitizing everything, right? Like Korea and Singapore did 20 years ago. And then the first thing they look for is that thousands of data entry experts. It doesn't sound very sexy, but where are these data experts? And sometimes nowhere to be found. So where we're finding at the World Bank success is when there's a big digitization strategy aligned with a bunch of local and international private sector partners, and rapid skilling of thousands of unemployed youth or just graduate youth on specific things, let it be by biometrics or data entry or geospatial, so that they can be either rapidly hired and deployed in that digitization effort, or start their own company and start to subcontract for these either private or public big projects going on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Samia. Maybe I'm being time conscious, and apologies, Irene, for cutting you off. If I would ask you for the one or two things highest on your wish list is maybe the wrong wording, but if you want to be more inclusive, you want to have a different tech economy coming out of that and the restart, and a much more inclusive one, be it female, be it gender, be it be it geographical, so including the smaller places in the world that are underserved today. Undoubtedly, I've seen many of those. What would be the one or two things you would recommend your fellow colleagues in policy, in NGOs, in funding, to really look at? And maybe Irene, you would like to take it away.
Okay, yeah, well, look, as Bob Black said, the reinvention of daily life means marching off the edge of our maps. So what that means for me is we, meaning in organizations like the IDB, in government, in civil society groups, we have to get out of our comfort zone. And that's what we're doing at IDB Lab. This is what will help underserved startup communities accelerate their growth and connectivity with the rest of the world. So we need to be deliberate. In your global startup ecosystem report, you said tech ecosystems is concentrated but increasingly democratized. If we want, I think we have an opportunity to accelerate that, but we need to be really deliberate and get out of our comfort zone, look with the same, and pay attention to those emerging stars in less connected or in those emerging ecosystems, and give them a chance to become global. So we're going to be very deliberate in doing that at IDB Lab.
Unearth these nuggets that we haven't seen before. The great ideas.
I would echo that.
One or two things you really.
Just one or two quickly, absolutely, and I would echo that we have to work differently together. We have to collaborate and work in different ways. So getting out of your comfort zone and making these broad collaborations that connects the micro with the macro and reaches out. I'm absolutely 100% with you. Anywhere, where is the innovation happening? And in a digital world, investors can get close to where that innovation is happening, and they need to understand that. And the collaborations across all sectors come together to support that ecosystem. And we would ask that the governments ensure that there's an enabling environment for this. And finally, of course, thinking first and foremost with young women at the center of this, because we will see a rapid transformation if we are deliberate about putting young women at the center of inclusive growth.
Yeah, Janet, thank you so much for touching also upon this concept of local connectedness. Ruben earlier today, Startup Amsterdam, was referring to how can community come together and advocate to governments, to other stakeholders. That's the opportunity. Now, Samia, maybe one or two closing remarks from your side. I know you're incredibly focused on education. We hear it all across panels how important it is to level the playing field by bringing education into these underserved communities.
Right. Well, what Irene and Janet said summarizes it all. I look at report like the one produced by Startup Genome, and it has already a lot of recommendations. Let's use them. So my recommendation would be, do not reinvent the wheel. Use what exists already, even if your organization did not create it. It's a good recommendation. And the second one, put the leadership of the country behind it. Lead by example, communicate about it, invest in girls or in inclusion, provide all the instruments such as scholarship, such as free training, boot camps, etc. Go to them if they don't know how to come to you. So that would be my recommendations.
Samia, Janet, Irene, it has been a great pleasure. Thanks so much for
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, dialogue and sharing.
Yeah, we'll stay connected. Okay, take care. All right.
Stay connected.
Thank you. Bye for now.